Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals, I'm your host Hannah, and this is Under the Scrubs. All right, everyone shut up. My favorite podcast is back on. We are back today for part 2 of our Christopher Duntsch, aka Dr. Death episode. I'm just going to jump into it at least jump into my timeout because I got a lot to cover. And this timeout is just something that's been weighing really heavy on my heart. Those of us who work in the medical field, we take this position typically for one reason, right? We love to care for people. We love to help them. I know I've always wanted to be a nurse since I was a kid, and I was definitely that over-the-top ICU nurse that, like, my patients were fully bathed. They'd get lotion. I trimmed eyebrow hairs, nose hairs, ear hairs. I would shave them. I'd pluck your chin hairs. I even did pore strips sometimes. Like, you went to sleep and you'd wake up even better, right? Like, you'd be like, dang, I look good. I would joke with my patients and I'm like, you're the center of my love and attention for 12 hours, but like, I'm being serious. What we did not sign up for is to not come home the same way we went to work. Okay. This past week has produced so much violence towards hospital employees, and even a hospital administrator really shined a light on how they felt about their staff. West Palm, Florida, a 67-year-old nurse was beaten so badly. Her attacker basically broke every bone in her face. She had brain bleeds, and she's most likely going to lose her eyesight. She's most likely going to lose her eyes, and she's in the ICU. Her attacker was a 33-year-old man who was brought in as a 5150 or a Baker Act, wherever they call it, where you guys are from, is an involuntary detainment. He jumped up on the bed unprovoked and attacked her. They're charging him with attempted murder, and they recently added on the escalation of a hate crime. And not only was this nauseating to read about and to see the photos, God, of this poor nurse, the 911 call was released. And let me read a little snippet of what was said. Hospital CEO, we had a Baker Act patient that beat a staff member unconscious, now running around the building. 911 operator, you said they assaulted the employee until they passed out? Hospital CEO, yeah, unconscious. I'm not worried about that part. I need the Baker Act dealt with. When later asked where the suspect was, the administrator said, I'm not sure. She's probably gonna die. I'm sorry, what? Your hospital CEO said that about... No, I'd probably get arrested. I'm not going to say it here just in case it ever got used against me, but that's ridiculous. Okay. So then they come in with this blanket statement. Oh, well, all of our staff go through de-escalation training to protect themselves. You know what the extent of my bedside training has ever been? A 4-hour class. A 4-hour class to protect myself against patients. When I was in the psych hospital, PRN, it was a 2.5-day class. I was better prepared there, and I maybe got attacked like 3 to 4 times, was able to defend myself. That's great. Inpatient, shit, I can't even tell you how much. Now, for those of you that don't know me, I'm tall and I'm built. I've had to square with patients, like get into a stance, only to assert myself that, 1, I'm not going to be a punching bag. 2, I don't care enough about my job to not defend myself. The reality is something needs to change drastically and now. And if you think that this doesn't affect you, one day it's going to. The chance of you being physically assaulted as a healthcare worker is already incredibly high. And now we're seeing the severity of these assaults escalating. Kentucky, a 25-year-old woman beat the absolute shit out of an ED nurse, dragged her to the floor, and stomped her head. Pennsylvania, a man zip-tied and held ICU staff hostage. He killed an officer, shot and injured a doctor, a nurse, a custodian, and 2 other officers, and was eventually killed in a shootout with the police. Chicago, an ED doc was stabbed in the chest by a patient along with another staff member that has not been identified. I couldn't find it anywhere. Scranton, Pennsylvania. A man stabbed a security officer because he wasn't given pain meds after he had ripped his IV out. These hospitals do not care about patients, and they definitely don't care about staff. This is why nurses and medical professionals are leaving the bedside in droves. We don't get paid all that well in reality to deal with this shit. Prison nursing is better than bedside, and that's working with criminals, people who have killed others. It doesn't matter what side of the political scale you sit on, what your background is, who you love to who you love and want to date, who you want to hold hand. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. Okay. When we are divided as people, we will not accomplish anything. We need to demand change, better working conditions, and safety, knowing that when we go to work, we're going to come back home the same way. When there are no nurses left to care for these patients in the hospitals, administrators will only have themselves to blame. Sorry, I know that was long, but damn, that's been sitting on really heavy on my chest. And now we're going to get back to the heartwarming story of Dr. Death. I'm so sorry. I guess I'm just going to keep with the theme here. All right. Last week I left you with that fear of like the being sued culture and like culture of silence that these hospitals have really cultivated. No one wants to get sued for millions. They just want to clutch their pearls and wallets. So it's easier to kick this threat to safety of a doctor down the road for someone else to deal with. Also, this data bank where awful doctors are reported, that needs to be public knowledge. Okay, I'll start a petition. Dr. Henderson and Dr. Kirby are also taking measures into their own hands to try and take Duntsch down. And Duntsch is kind of unknowingly nearing the end of his career, and he's going to start crashing out. So that's kind of fun to watch. So July 30th, 2012, Henderson calls the president of Baylor Plano, Jerry Garrison, about Dr. Duntsch, and he tells him about Floella Brown, and then about Mary Eford. He lists the damage, and the autopsy from Floella actually showed that she had a massive air embolism in her brain with infarction of brain tissue, so death of brain tissue. Garrison was like, yeah, he no longer has surgical privileges at the hospital. I have to be very careful, though, with what I say to you. I'm really uncomfortable talking about this. We tried our very best to make sure that he didn't get privileges anywhere else. Really? You tried so hard? Like you reported him to the database, or you just kind of gave him a letter that was like, yeah, we investigated him, but like it's closed, so he can go work somewhere else. Henderson talks about how knucking futz Duntsch is, and that he's basically talked his way out of the issues at Baylor Plano. Jerry's like, no, he did not. Let me be clear. He did not. Alan Shulkin is a doctor on the Texas Medical State Board in 2012, and he got a call from a fellow surgeon about Duntsch. Shulkin decides to report Duntsch himself, and this is going to start a slow, long process. They launch an investigation. It's going to take months, but if the reporting came from Baylor, evidence would already be there, and it could have been so much faster. Like, how fast? Literally within days. If someone is so bad, the board can meet almost immediately and place an immediate suspension on their license. And then you're going to have to come back later to prove you aren't that bad, but it's to protect the public. So Baylor got slapped with a $100,000 fine for not reporting Duntsch. That's nothing, okay? The shitty thing is, a year to the day, notice the fines were withdrawn, and they won't release the records. Why? Because they're considered confidential. Kirby and Henderson had happened chance, they ran into each other at a small hospital, and they're in the break room starting to talk about Duntsch. They both know him. And they're like, okay, no, we need to call Texas Medical Board. So they said, yeah, thank you for reporting the issue. We'll get back to you. I'm sorry, 2 dead patients, a quadriplegic and a paraplegic. Is that enough? And trust me, they weren't the only ones that were calling either. So in order for Duntsch to go to a new hospital, right, he's got to get his credentials. He's got to get, some kind of voucher saying, hey, this guy's good. He is who he is, right? But Duntsch's former supervisor at the University of Tennessee, Dr. Kevin Foley, he called Henderson about it. And he's like, well, I can't really mention in this voucher, like what I've heard that he's done in Dallas. It's really not that simple. Like here, he was average. They were asking about the form. Henderson was asking about the form. And he's like, well, the form just asks him, like, how did he perform during his time under Foley? And he's like, there's nothing about would you recommend him to your hospital, etc. Foley says there's a box for comments. And when he got the same form from the Dallas Medical Center, he wrote in that, hey, he has had 2 problematic issues at Dallas Medical Center. Check it out. He wouldn't say anything more because of hearsay. And Henderson says, fine. All right, say it's from me. Foley's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I never saw any gross incompetence under my supervision. Basically, Foley was scared to do anything because there was a lawsuit in Tennessee that had two doctors. Dr. A tried to stop Dr. B. A was thinking that B was being dangerous. B sues A and wins. Now Foley feels like physicians aren't going to write negative reference letters about one another because of that. It comes back down to, I don't want to be sued. Okay, December 2012. Kirby gets a call to come help with the patient, Jacqueline Troy, who suffered severe complications from a cervical surgery from Duntsch. Are we surprised? Okay, this was at the Legacy Surgery Center. She was transferred via ambulance to a large hospital in Dallas. Her incision was disgustingly infected. Her vocal cords cut, and she had a hole in her windpipe. What? Troy survived miraculously, although her vocal cords never recovered and her voice has been affected forever. Now, the crazy thing is, Kirby's kicking back. He's living his life, obviously concerned about this shit, right? He receives an invitation 6 months later to have this nice fancy dinner on behalf of Duntsch. Okay, he's being presented at the University General Hospital as hey, this is our new spine surgeon. Come have this fancy ass dinner, right? The University General Hospital was previously Southampton Community Hospital. It was bought in 2012. Kirby calls the owner, Dr. Chahadi, and he's like, dude, you do not want this guy. Chahadi says, well, we haven't had issues, so we can't really do much. And so Kirby's like, bullshit. He was having bad results there. So the concern was if he cut Duntsch loose, he's going to, what? Turn around and sue. Kirby asked about if Chahadi had checked the databank, and Chahadi said, yeah, they did. Turns out that's actually a lie because there was a report on there. Literally less than 2 weeks later, June 13th, 2013, Kirby gets a call from Chahadi going, yeah, just kidding. This guy's awful. We have a real problem and we need you to fix it. So Jeff Glidewell, that is his next victim. He sees this infomercial about Duntsch and he's like, yep, this guy, he checks all my boxes. He looks very friendly, very knowledgeable. I need to go see him. When Kirby gets a call to come fix Jeff, Jeff has a retained foreign object in his neck. So initially there was, Duntsch was supposed to remove diseased disc out of the cervical spine. He made an incision in the wrong spot in the neck. He went through the left lobe of the thyroid gland, absolutely destroying it, cut through the side of the esophagus, and proceeds to drill a hole in the neck lateral to where he should have been. There were 2 ping pong ball sized holes in the neck. Okay. He injured the left vertebral artery, which is a massive artery. He shoved a sponge in it and just sewed that bad boy up. So Kirby decided, okay, no, I'm not talking to hospital admin and medical board. This is too much. He calls Henderson and he's like, we need to go to a Dallas district attorney because this was attempted murder. I swear to God, this was awful. So June 19th, 2013, Glidewell is recovering in the hospital. At the same time, an email hits a Channel 8 news reporter named Brett Shipps, and the email is labeled, please investigate Dr. Christopher Duntsch. The sender said she had a friend that was permanently injured by him, and she knew of 2 patients who had died and 2 that were paralyzed. But when you Googled him, there was nothing but glowing reviews. So 2 hours later, Ship gets another email from the plaintiff's attorney, Kay Van Way, and she reaches out to Ship to do a little expose and get this out to the public for knowledge and awareness. Okay, so now Duntsch has gone from being known in the surgical community to now the whole Dallas community knows him, and it's not great, okay? Kirby writes a scathing letter to the medical board. Now you got Ship poking around, and now the medical board's like, okay, yeah, we got a fire under our ass. We got to go, okay? June 26, 2013, almost a full year after receiving the complaint, Duntsch's license is suspended temporarily, okay? Now, you look at this healthcare analysis firm, Merritt Hawkins, and they say neurosurgeons bring in $2.4 million every year to a hospital. This explains how Duntsch kept getting hired, because hospitals are businesses, neurosurgeons are money. Cha-ching, cha-ching. All right, fall 2013. Kirby and Henderson go to the DA office after the temporary license suspension, and they both said, no, this guy's a serial killer and a maimer of people that are seeking help in the healthcare system. Okay, they're assured, yeah, we took your complaint. We're going to take it seriously. It's going to put to the very top of my stacks. And then nothing happened. Kirby called 3 to 4 times. What the hell's going on? Well, his license has been suspended, but, he can't practice. He's not doing harm anymore. Why are you upset? Okay, Kirby's like, yeah, well, I'm upset because he's killing people and he's hurting them. So he kept calling every month and a half. December 6th, 2013, Duntsch's license is officially stripped. 10 days later, he files for bankruptcy for $1 million in debt. He spent this time planning a comeback. He posted a picture to his Facebook page of him in a new OR, and someone commented, there's Christopher saving another life. Glidewell, being my spirit animal in pettiness, commented on it and said, maybe murdering somebody else. Duntsch ends up sending him this long-ass message via Facebook and says, your surgery was routine until I encountered a thick scar in what I believed was diffuse sarcoma or metastatic disease. The tissue was abnormal, fragile, bled much, and was difficult to control. Yeah, that was muscle tissue in the neck. He goes on to say, I showed perfect clinical judgment, control in the OR, and every step that followed was to protect you to the best of my ability. Sir, get out of here. Reporters are now on the trail of Duntsch, and the board issued a press release about suspending his license. And now all of a sudden, this story starts blowing up on news channels, articles. What used to be private outrage is now public. All right. Philip Mayfield was left paralyzed by Duntsch in 2013 after a cervical operation at that Legacy Surgery Center. And unfortunately, after he'd been paralyzed, he starts watching all of this play out on TV after the incident. January 2014, Duntsch is back home with his parents in Colorado. He got pulled over driving on 2 flat tires, and he reeked of alcohol. Okay, he got arrested for a DUI, and he was sent to a detox facility. We're now crashing out. Okay, September 2014, while his girlfriend was in the hospital, his girlfriend was Wendy, while she was in the hospital giving birth to their second son, Duntsch showed up at Wendy's mom's house and was pounding on the door. The mom's like, no, I'm not answering. I'm watching, the first baby, their first son. Duntsch comes around the back, lets himself in the house, snatches the son, and drives away. Obviously, he ends up, getting pulled over. He's got to bring the kid back. He's not doing well mentally. Okay. Next month, October 2014, police were called to Wendy's apartment as Duntsch had struck her during an argument. Now, March 2015, police were called after bystanders noticed a man with bloody hands and face beating on the doors of a bank, yelling about his family being in danger. Yeah, I'll give you one guess who it was. It was Duntsch. His shirt was like some black scrub shirt. It was covered in blood, which I don't know how you can tell if it's black, but pop off. He was taken to a psychiatric hospital. And 2 weeks later, Duntsch himself called the police after getting into a fight with Wendy's current boyfriend, said he got stabbed, but police noted that his story was very difficult to follow and he did not make sense. Okay, April 2015, Duntsch's dad wired him some money to a Walmart, and so Duntsch is going to do a little shopping around. He filled a cart of $881 worth of stuff, electronics, sunglasses, clothes, computer. He's balling out, right? He placed it into bags that he stole from the register, threw on a new pair of pants, rolled his nasty ass ones and threw them in the cart, and he walked out with all the stuff and got arrested for shoplifting. May 2015, the Texas Observer published an article about the shoplifting incident. Duntsch commented on it himself, saying it's untrue, a conspiracy and cabal between Kirby, Doug Wan, who was a partner at the medical group that first recruited Duntsch, and Kay Van Way, the plaintiff's attorney. Kirby, being my other spirit animal in pettiness, commented on it and said, doesn't anyone reading this idiot Duntsch's comment on this article doubt that I was 100% correct in reporting him to the Texas Medical Board? Duntsch then goes on an online tirade for days, threatening people online. And Kirby, being the smart man he is, prints this out. It's 82 pages long, and he takes that to the DA's office. So there is a new district attorney in Dallas County, Michelle Schugert, and she's an assistant DA, and she started working on the case. And eventually she'd actually end up taking it over. She used Mary Eford. Since she was over 65 years old, she qualified as an old person under Texas law. So the jury could have a range of 5 years to 99 years or life in prison. She was using previous cases to show that he shouldn't have operated on Mary. She'd only had 4 months before the statute of limitations were up to make a case. So this was a new case to the justice system. You're basically putting a doctor on trial for how they practice medicine. They were able to put together an indictment for Mary, calling it aggravated assault, and they included Floella Brown and Jeff Glidewell. Now they had to wait for him to come back to Texas from Colorado, and luckily they didn't have to wait very long. July 21st, 2015, they found out he was in town at the time, and so they were going to indict him. The grand jury returned the indictment, and the warrant returned for the arrest. When he was arrested and started to be filled in on the charges, he starts explaining what happened in the cases like they had been routine. He basically starts giving report to these officers, and they're like, yeah, I don't give a shit, dude. And he goes, nah, I did nothing wrong. He blamed Floella's death on the hospital, saying, I told him not to transfer her. She'll have brain death and die. But they transferred her anyways, and she died. Oh, my God. Okay. So he says that the drug and alcohol allegations were cooked up by the DA and the surgeons of Dallas who are conspiring to ruin him. No, baby, these are your own actions. Michelle Schugert was just getting started, though. She spent the next year and a half finding more victims, a total of 38. 33 of them were hurt, injured, maimed, paralyzed, something, right? And he killed 2 of them. At least 20 of them were severely injured with permanent injuries. Only 3 of them had no complications. Not a great ratio. He was booked into jail July 21st, 2015 with official charges of aggravated assault, injury to an elderly person, and his bond was set for $600,000. He wanted to ask for it to be reduced so he could get out before trial. So Texas law, it's very difficult to get malpractice lawsuits because they put a cap on it at $250,000, right? So it's usually not worth attorneys' time and energy. You really have to prove malice, that the doctor basically woke up and chose violence for that day. Kay Van Way took 14 cases herself. Victims came to her after seeing what was going on in the news, and physicians even did too that were trying to get Duntsch stopped. So eventually I'd like to cover some of like these bills, but like the Texas House bill that was passed, that's the one that put the cap on your essentially pain and suffering, right? Because honestly, the whole thing is just kind of bullshit. So basically you have a cap on your pain and suffering unless you have like economic value, right? So who puts, what group of people's at risk? Elderly, babies, children, and disabled. Okay, so essentially you can take your kid to the ED and your kid dies and you go to passes obviously like malpractice. You go to an attorney and go, I want to sue them. And they're like, the best I can do is $250,000 that you'll get. Not worth my time and energy. You're better off having another kid. That awful. Okay. So Duntsch is sitting in jail. He's awaiting trial and he calls his dad and he's like, I need to get out. I'm being, set up to fail in this trial. And his main goal is to get his medical license back and return to the OR. Because, now he's had time to sit around and make himself better. At the bond hearing, they took a look at his last bank statement. His accountant loaned him $13,000, which he blew in a month with like cash withdrawals. He did a $626 shopping spree at Walmart. He actually paid for it this time. He had 3 charges in one day at a pub that totaled $123. He asked for the bond to be lowered and that he didn't pose a risk to the public, but they played the recording of Duntsch wanting to get his medical license back. They asked his dad and his dad basically confirmed it. So they didn't lower the bond and they couldn't pay it. So the trial began February 2nd, 2017. Duntsch is confident he didn't do anything wrong. They focused case on the elderly abuse with Mary Eford. They did talk about his other cases to kind of paint that this was a pattern and part of a bigger issue. There were powerful statements given by victims, some giving him for the very first time. Dr. Martin Lazar sat on the Texas board, and he testified at the trial as like a neurosurgery expert and basically had to teach the jury about neurosurgery so they can kind of get a baseline. They think it's during Lazar's education that Duntsch's own defense team saw a difference in him, like he was actually realizing he was a really shit surgeon. Kimberly, that nurse practitioner that he was banging, was called to testify too, and she was asked to read the email where Duntsch talked about becoming a cold-blooded killer. The defense called one single witness, a neurosurgeon from a highly regarded medical school in Dallas, to off-put the blame from Duntsch to more of like the healthcare system, painting it as like a complete system failure. So February 14th, 2017, there was 8 days of testimony and the jurors left to deliberate, and it only took them 4 hours to agree on a verdict and only 1 hour to decide on punishment. He was convicted of injury to an elderly person and sentenced to life in prison. He is believed to be the first doctor in the country to be tried in court for how he practiced medicine. And there was some pushback in the medical community after this. Like now they're concerned, like surgeons are concerned that their behavior in the OR can now be criminalized. They can be thrown in jail for just trying to save people's lives. And like, I get it, but also like you're not decapitating people, right? Like there's a difference between you sewing up sponges, putting so much surgifoam in someone's neck that it's, compressing on their nerves and they're losing sensation and control of us. You know what I mean? Like I get it, but at the same time, I don't know. So he is currently incarcerated in Huntsville. It's about an hour outside of Houston. He is now 53 years old, and his earliest possibility of parole is July 20th, 2045. This was one of the most mind-boggling things that I had heard of when this story was breaking. I was still very young and naive and that mindset that no, these hospitals do care about their patients and their employees. So like egg on my face, right? I just couldn't believe that our healthcare system was so jacked up that instead of like coughing up some money if they got sued to prevent someone from maiming patients, and like, let's be real, these are victims. That just absolutely nauseates me. They could have been hailed a hero like Kirby and Henderson for actually taking this guy down and doing something about it. But they just kicked him down the street to the next hospital, or like, I don't know, go be someone else's problem. I know there are certain surgeons that I work with that I would not let touch me with the 10-foot pole. And then there are some that I'm like, hey, if I needed surgery, you're number one on my list. Okay. This is your sign to befriend your local OR nurses and surgical techs so you know who to ask for recommendations in the future. Okay. Also, always be aware of doctors or surgeons that quietly disappear from hospitals. I can think of a couple. Hit me up if you want to know the tea. So join me next week as we are going to keep up, I guess, the theme with fraud for February. We're going to talk about the fake nurses that were being pumped out of Florida. I'd made several jokes one time when I'd do something stupid. I'd be like, oh, don't worry, I didn't go to nursing school in Florida. And I was stunned when it went over people's heads. So yeah, Florida got caught with fake nurses who never went to nursing school. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Kid, love you. Bye.